The Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Nothing spells classic like Nintendo's answer to the 16-bit console wars. Despite serious competition from Sega's Mega Drive, its focus on more advanced technology and high-quality games made the Super Nintendo the best-selling console of the generation, and left with some of the greatest games ever made. So when Nintendo announced a dedicated console bundled with 20 of those iconic games plus another that initially went unreleased, there was huge excitement, but also skepticism. The year before, Nintendo also released a similar console based on the Nintendo Entertainment System on November 2016, which was everything you wanted from a dedicated system made by Nintendo. However, they didn't make enough systems to meet with the demand, selling out in minutes, becoming the product for scalpers listing multiple times the original retail price, and to add more confusion and frustration, Nintendo discontinued production on April 2017. This led fans to expect more of the same with the upcoming Super Nintendo Entertainment System Nintendo Classic Mini, or SNES Classic Edition, or SNES Mini, or Super Nintendo Mini, whatever you want to call it. However, Nintendo profusely stated that more systems were being made and are now anticipating the high demand, shipping more units on the first run than the number of NES Minis sold throughout the whole lifespan. Are Nintendo learning their lesson? Well, considering I was able to get one of these rather easily on the second shipment, and Nintendo plan to continue production into 2018 as well as relaunch the NES Mini, I hope so. The least I can say is that they're doing a better job with this than the NES Mini. But was it even worth the effort trying to get one of these even on launch day? When you open the box, you'll get the system, 2 controllers, a HDMI cable and a USB cable, but not the AC adapter which you have to supply yourself. Make sure you have one with an output of 5 volts and 1 amp, or get the official Nintendo adapter. This is according to the manual and box. Why they couldn't just supply an AC adapter like any other video game console I've ever bought is beyond me. The design of the system is modeled on the original console and differs by region. This is what the PAL version looks like. If you live in North America, this is what you'll get, and in Japan it's modeled on the Super Famicom. As you already know, it's tiny. I initially thought people exaggerated the size, but it really does fit in the palm of your hands, and even the box is almost the exact size of the original system. Speaking of the box, it looks fantastic. It's as classic as you can get, and in the gaming section of a retail store, it fits right in. Even the trailer was made to look like one of the older ones from the 90s. The size makes the system easy to store, especially handy if you have so many gaming consoles. However, the short USB and HDMI cables can potentially limit spots that might suit perfectly on your TV setup. The controllers look and feel so much like the original design, I shouldn't even have to compare. Okay, it's lighter, it uses different materials and has a shorter cable, the latter I'll get to in a moment, but the differences are so minor you'll hardly notice them if I didn't say anything. It's a great replica, and is especially convenient that it comes bundled with 2 so you have multiplayer available the moment you open the box. The connectors here can also plug into a Wii Remote and NES Mini, so if you have one of these and haven't bought a second controller or hate the short cable, there's your solution. Or if you have any 8 to 16-bit games you downloaded off the Virtual Console that aren't on the mini Super Nintendo, you can now use a replica controller to play them. The cables are 2 feet or 60 centimeters longer than the NES Mini controller, which means you're more likely to be able to sit on a couch. However, it's still 3 feet or 90 centimeters shorter than the original controller, which I can partially understand. Because the controllers are compatible with the Wii Remote, they didn't want so much excess wire in front of you if you ever used the replica controller to play games on the Virtual Console. Still, they should have just made it as long as the original, because you're going to be using this controller mostly for the Super Nintendo Mini anyway, and I hope Nintendo again increased the cable length of the NES Mini controllers when they re-released the system in 2018. Graphically, the games run in 720p and 60 frames per second. HDMI input is the only option, but considering that most TVs today are like that as well, it doesn't really matter. Despite not eliminating the input slowdown in games like Super Castlevania 4 or Mega Man X, it looks as good as you'd expect, no blur and no control delay. You're definitely playing with superpower. Not only that, but you can change the aspect ratio between 4:3 and 8:7, aka pixel perfect. The original Super Nintendo hardware was programmed to run at an 8:7 aspect ratio, but back in the early 90s when CRTs were the common television, they stretched the picture to 4:3, which is obvious in the shape of some of the objects or characters in game. For review's sake, I'm using the pixel perfect option because that's how Super Nintendo games are supposed to look, at least the ones developed by Nintendo. I go into more detail, but I'm saving it for a future Super Nintendo review. I'm just pointing out that the SNES Mini gives you the option to choose between ratios if you care about that sort of thing. It would have been nice if the manual suggested the correct ratio for each game. Other options include languages, scan lines, and vibrant borders which have nothing to do with the game itself, much like the Super Game Boy. Plenty of options, but I think I'll pass. If I wasn't a game reviewer, I wouldn't even be thinking about these features because the games included here. Seriously, look at the back of the box. Do you see a game that's bad? A physical copy of some of these would cost more than the system itself, like Earthbound or Mega Man X. Sure, the novelty of collecting games might be up your alley, but if you only care about playing the games, this is all you need. The fact that it runs in HD and can use the original controller is a bonus. That being said, there are plenty of games that should be in this collection, but just aren't, like Pilot Wings, Stunt Race FX, Chrono Trigger, the Donkey Kong Country sequels, and Super Mario All-Stars. And have Nintendo forgotten about the beat-em-up genre? But then again, with the exception of Final Fight, all the best ones are licensed, so what can you do? I'm still completely satisfied with the games available on this system. They vary by genre and provide over 200 hours of gameplay, if you're trying to complete them all at least once. And that's not including the replay value they obviously provide. But the biggest talking point is the addition of Star Fox 2, which was initially scheduled for a 1996 release. The game was all but done, but Shigeru Miyamoto decided at the last minute to cancel everything as the PlayStation and Sega Saturn were already released with more advanced 3D hardware and wanted to focus on the Nintendo 64. But 21 years later, Star Fox 2 finally got its first official release by Nintendo on this console and fully translated. But first, you have to beat the first level of the first Star Fox to unlock it. Instead of an on-rail shooter where you choose a path based on the difficulty, you're placed in the Lilat system where you have to move your ships around to intercept enemy fighters/missiles and retake planets in order to defend Corneria. You could say that real-time strategy is another subgenre for Star Fox 2. You can choose different characters, roam around wherever you want in an area, as opposed to being stuck on rails, and the R-Wind can turn into this walker thing on planets. If you lose all your lives or if Corneria's damage levels reach 100%, the game is over. Star Fox 2 is even more graphically impressive than the predecessor. How a Super Nintendo can render these polygons, including the ones with textures, with a frame rate higher than 1 per second, along with more detailed backgrounds is quite an achievement. Nintendo should have released this back in 1996 because it would have been one of the biggest system pushes at the time. It's surprisingly not too shabby to play by today's standards, and it was finished. What a waste. In the main menu of the system, you can sort out the games alphabetically, by multiplayer, the year it was made, by publisher, etc. You can go back to the main menu from the game by pressing the reset button on the system. As you'd expect, there's a save state feature which allows you to exit the game, the snapshot is automatically saved with an option to keep it, and load right where you left off with up to 4 slots for each game. But the rewind system I didn't expect. Say you're playing a hard game like Super Ghouls and Ghosts. You need to be on your toes at all times. You lose a life and have to start the level all over again, but you decide you're having none of it. What you do is go back to the main menu, it's automatically saved where you left off. Press X to access the rewind feature and choose how many seconds ago you want to go back to. You can even do it for older save states, like if you want to come back to another frustrating game like Contra 3 a couple of days later, you can just scroll through the save states and access the reward feature from there. This obviously makes games so much easier to beat, but it's clearly cheating, and I recommend trying to beat the games the old-fashioned way. I'm only using it just to demonstrate the feature itself. Yeah, I don't feel right using it. Now you know whenever a demo comes up if you leave the game alone for too long. On the Super Nintendo Mini it's no different. But what happens in the menu is that either Mario or Luigi will appear, pick a random game, and play the record of your save state. If you don't have any, like if you've just bought the system, the demo will be the beginning of a game. Sometimes they even change the resolution settings, but don't worry, they're not changed permanently. Along with the fact you have to visually shove the previous save state out of the way to override it, these are the extra personality quirks that add to the quality of the system, and make it more than just a collection of legendary games. The hardcore gamers are very likely to have the original Super Nintendo with all the games, but this was clearly made for the casual audience just looking to play some Super Nintendo games on their HD TV, which makes sense. SNES games and consoles are getting more expensive, why not just get a dedicated system that plays multiple titles for less? If you have a chance to get your hands on one of these, take it because it's a fantastic little system. Hopefully Nintendo continues shipping a high quantity regularly, because people who want this thing shouldn't have to pay 2 or 3 times the suggested price. Some of the greatest games ever made for the Super Nintendo are on here, with the best picture quality you could ask for. It doesn't require a shelf of games to store, and nor does it cost an insane amount of money. Expect a few Super Nintendo reviews in the future.